Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. My name's Val. I work on the marketing team here at Technology Partners. In a second, I'm going to hand you over to Sarah Vickers from Sicon, and she'll take you through the session this morning. Before I do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. The lines are all muted from our side of things. It's just so that we avoid background noise and then everyone can hear Sarah nice and clearly. That said, if you do have a question, please feel free just to pop it in the chat during the session, or alternatively, we will open up the lines at the end so you can ask anything that you like at that point. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand you over to Sarah and we'll get things started. Thanks, Sarah.
Lovely, thank you, Val. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's keeping well this morning. So coffee's at the ready for the session this morning for good old distribution. So essentially what we'll do this morning is we've got a couple more joining now. Good morning, Alan. How are you doing? They're really coming in now. Good morning. How are you doing? So we're covering the session around, somebody's just put their hand up. I don't know who that is. There's no name against it though, Val, so I can't see who that is.
I'll just pick that up, Sarah. Here we go.
Shall I carry on and then you
carry on and I'll deal with any
having
Q&A and that
with
type
the session
of thing.
and they can't hear me. But so sorry, I've just realised that I've completely shared the wrong screen. Getting back into the right screen would help. Multiple screens again, Val. I've got used to having just one screen. Right, so let me just double check. Is everybody seeing my screen in front of them? Are you seeing Sage 200? There's nods going on. Perfect. Thank you for that. So the module that we're going to cover this morning is called distribution. And as you can see on that far left-hand corner, distribution just basically sits as an integrated module within inside of Sage 200. But it's broken down into different sections. So it's kind of like a bit of a pick and mix, really. You know, there's certain things that you think might be relevant for your organization. You just buy the modules within the module, basically, that you'd like to buy. So what we'll do this morning is I'll concentrate on the main ones that customers tend to find really beneficial. And then we'll see how we go for time this morning, and then we'll just pick up on some of the elements of some of the others for you. So essentially, where we have the possibility of extending the standard Sage screens, as you'll see with SOP management, we have additional functionality in the standard Sage screens. If there's nowhere for us to be able to add our additional fields, and that's where we'll create brand new screens inside of our distribution module. So the first of those is SOP management, and SOP management is really about an easy way, as you'll see in a moment, of getting sales orders on, being able to manage those sales orders in a really quick and efficient way. So, imagine I've got the customer on the phone, how am I dealing with that call? So as you'll see in a moment, there's some additional fields that sit inside of standard Sage 200 sales order processing. So great for any of your organizations where you do have people that are taking orders over the phone or even via email and they need to get those orders on really quickly. Future sales has a couple of different benefits, really. So the first is for those of you who perhaps have stock set up inside of Sage, where you might have set up your minimum stock levels years and years ago when you originally set up Sage, but you've never evaluated it and you've never changed it because it's too much of a long-winded exercise. Because let's face it, manually having to change every single minimum stock level is a bit of a pain. So what we have is a nice simple utility that looks at any historical information, it looks at trends, and then it makes some suggestions as to what your minimum stock levels ought to be. And with a click of a button, as you'll see later on, we can change it. But we also have the ability to generate some sales order forecasts, again, to look at trends to see have you decreased or increased your sales and whether that ought to be generated as an additional forecast to then link into our material planning. So we have a material planning for those of you who don't necessarily manufacture, but you want to have an easy way to make suggestions of purchase orders, be able to unpick very simply why those suggestions are coming through, and then generate a purchase order really simply off the back of those. So again, that's something else that we'll show you this morning. Coming back up the screen again, we have a container manager. So for those of you who are perhaps shipping in containers from abroad and you need an easy way of being able to manage what's going in those containers to help you manage whether you've exceeded the volume and the weight or under, so you're making the most of those containers being shipped in, but also a very simple way of tracking them, because as we know with a good old Suez Canal all those years ago when a container got a ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, so that had massive impact on all of the other vessels coming through. So it's just an easy way within Sage 200 to be able to track the actual date that's coming through, and then add any notes and any comments, any problems alongside that. Pot management. So pot management, again, as you'll see later on, provides a number of different benefits. So for those of you who perhaps don't have stock set up on Sage, but you want to have a code instead of having to type out free text, that's an easy way of doing it. And things like supplier KPIs and managing supplier quantity breaks, again, we'll come into that later on. Pre-allocation. As we know with standard Sage, you can't allocate a sales order to a purchase order unless you physically booked it in. Whereas we give you the capacity to be able to ring fence, for want of a better word, a sales order to a purchase order that might still be on the water or air freight, but it hasn't actually landed yet and it hasn't been booked in. So as you can imagine, that provides a number of different benefits, which we'll come and talk through later on. Right, reserves and call-offs. So as the name probably suggests, an easy way of setting up stock reserves for customers and then doing a call-off of those and then generating the sales order off the back of it. So it provides nice, simple visibility of what stock you've got and who that stock is for. And then the ability to set up contracts for sales and purchases. Again, we'll come and talk about that in a lot more depth and detail later on. I'm not sure this is probably relevant for anybody in the session, so I'll skip over this one. This is usually for retail organisations where you have perhaps different variations of sizes of colours. So an easy way of generating all of those different variations in stock codes, and then an easy way of adding that onto sales order. So we'll probably skip over that one today. And then again, another easy one, pretty self-explanatory, warehouse replenishment. So if you want an easy way of moving stock from different warehouses, maybe you have a bulk location for those of you who perhaps do production, and you might have a bulk location where you want to move from that bulk location to your production area. It's an easy way of doing that replenishment, basically. So again, we'll come and talk about that later on in a lot more depth and detail. Right, let's come and show you these in action. So I'm going to come into standard Sage sales order processing. She says trying to find it. There we go. And this is where I was explaining earlier on that we've added a few additional fields in the standard Sage sales order processing. So great for any organisations that are having to put sales orders on manually. So you'll see in here, I'm going to come and add on an order for good old Abby. Now this is the first additional screen that we present to you. So it's just simply flagging that you've already got some undispatched orders. Do I just want to simply amend one that's already on there rather than having to create a brand new one? Now from here, I have got the ability to have templates set up. So if there are regular things that customers are ordering, or if you've got customers that are sending you an order via Excel, we can do a quick copy and paste from that Excel template, and it will then just automatically generate the sales order in here for you. Now, the main things I want to show you and concentrate on here today, though, in stock management is if I come in to add on my good old coffee machine. Poor old Steve is sick to death of seeing me add on coffee machines. And I'm going to add on, let's say 10 for today. Now, this is where, imagine, as I said, let's say I didn't have sufficient enough stock and I wanted to be able to see what stock we have. This is essentially our extra button that we present to you, which loads additional information. The first of which is, where is my stock? What's happening with my stock? Because what you don't want is salespeople overcommitting because they can see the stock on the shelf. We know what the salespeople are like. She says as one. So it might be that I can see the stock on the shelf, but what I don't realise is perhaps that's already been allocated to another customer or promised to another customer. Or for those of you who are building items, that might be stock components that you need in a build, but I don't know that as a salesperson. So what this additional screen is showing me is exactly what's happening with all of that stock in real time. So I can see if we've got any coming in on a purchase order with those drill downs. And again, I can drill into those purchase orders if I wanted to. Now, there's also some additional information that we pull through when we add on our container manager as well. So that's that little confirm tab that we'll come and talk about in a little bit more depth and detail later on. It's just flagging to me, yes, we've got a purchase order coming in, but it hasn't been ticked yet. So I can't guarantee that that's definitely going to be coming in on that date. And the other is that pre-allocation. So again, that order might be coming in, but is it already ring fenced for somebody else, another customer, or maybe a works order? Because again, I don't want to be over committing. So that's the first thing. If, or for those of you who do have our works orders or in a production environment, I can see if any of those components are already in a works order as a demand or they've been allocated. I can see what's actually physically in stock by warehouse and bin location, but I can then see how much we've actually physically got left, because it's also showing me any allocations to maybe sales orders that we've got or reserve stock as well. So that's picking up the reserve stock that I was talking about earlier on. So it really is, whilst I'm dealing with the call, it's giving me that information on what we've actually got. I can also see things like previous sales orders from that customer. So what have they purchased previously? What have we dispatched? What do they pay for that item as well? I've got the ability to see things like stock history and stock movement. So what's happening with the stock coming in and out. So again, a really simplistic way of being able to see where the stock is at any point in time. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can mark an order as lost, whether this is at a sales quote or indeed at a sales order. Now, I've just got a couple of reasons. You can have whatever reasons you like in there. But one of the things that you'll see later on when we come and look at what our minimum stock levels are is it will also include lost orders. So in reality, if we're losing orders because we've got no stock available, then clearly we need to be upping those stock levels. So that's something else that we can do within sales order processing management. Now, the other is that we can set up against a stock item a complementary, not to be confused with complimentary, a complementary item. So what is it that we always want to remind staff to add on? Well, I'm selling a coffee machine, so maybe you want to sell an espresso cup as well. Do you want to automatically add that on, and what price? So that's something else that we can do, and we can say, yeah, we're going to add that on, and it's automatically pulling through for me. Add that line, and we can add that on. If I actually put in a quantity, it would help add that on. So what it's now looking at is that reserves as well. So it's already recognised that I've got some reserve stock for that stock item for that customer. So it's saying, do you want to reduce that reserves rather than duplicating that information? Yes, I'm going to reduce it. So that's one of my outstanding reserves, and I'm going to allocate that stock, and we can add that on as well if we wanted to. So those are some of the extra items that we can add on in standard sales order processing. If I just come and close that for now, and then come and show the other items that we can do within distribution itself. So no, I don't want to create a purchase order. And you'll probably see some extra pop-ups from some of our other modules in a second, because I've got so many things turned on. Our projects module. There we go. Right, if we now come into stock management itself within distribution, you'll see that there's a couple of things that I can now do. One of which is manage all of those sales orders, whether that's managing it by a specific sales order or stock item, by a specific customer or supplier, or by any one of those dates. So this just provides me with an easy way of, first of all, seeing which items I need to allocate, but also how much have we actually got left, and how much is remaining, how many to to allocate. So a simple summary screen. Now it could be that I've already allocated stock, but I need to shift that stock around. So again, this provides you with an easy mechanism to unallocate stock, to move it around if you needed to. So if you've got a more urgent order that's come in, it makes it really easy for me to kind of maneuver and move those items through. So again, we've got those same distribution screens that you saw, the distribution button that you saw earlier on. So I can drill down to see my balances and stock history, etc. So that's the next thing that we can give you. I talked about lost orders. So we've got a little lost order inquiry that I can then report on. How many lost orders have we had and the reasons, and with the specific items, with the specific customers as an example. We can lock down certain users so that they only have permission to change or create a price book or amend a price book. So that's something that we can do. And we've also got the ability to do a markup by a customer as well. So essentially, you can say by product group, do we want to mark up that price, and how much do we want to mark up the percentage by? So it's a different way than the customer pricing banding, customer price bands. We're doing it at product group level, and we're basically saying, do we want to increase the percentage? And one of the things we'll come and talk about later on as well is, do we want to include landed costs or not as well? So that's part of POP management, which we'll come and talk about later on. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's SOP management. So we've got our sales order on. What we now need to look at is managing the stock. So what stock have we got? What should we be ordering? How can we manage that purchasing in an efficient way without usually lots of Excel spreadsheets and manual intervention? So the first of that functionality is within future sales, as I mentioned earlier on. So what this is basically doing is it's looking at a period of time. So the last last 2 years, average monthly demand, the last year and the last 3 months. Although if you do have seasonal trend variations, you'll see that I can look at a specific period last year. So, it could be that we have busy summer periods or Christmas periods, and I want to look at that period in time. That's the other way that I can do it. Or as you can see, I can look at specific stock items or product groups, or by suppliers, or even by warehouses. So you've got various options to filter to look at this data. Now, when this is run its routine, this is about giving me a recommendation. Nothing is set in stone, but it's giving me the detail behind the scenes as to why it's making that recommendation. So now, at the end of the day, it might say you've got 100% change in increasing your stock. It actually might say you need to decrease your stock. You'd be amazed how many of our customers find that they're holding too much stock. So this is going to give you that information on how much you should be holding as a minimum stock level. So if you think about in Sage, you set up your minimum stock levels. This is looking at that information to ensure that you're not holding too much stock and therefore taking up valuable warehouse space and of course cash flow, but also similarly, you're not holding too little, which means you might end up losing sales. So kind of like watching a boiling kettle, it's almost there. Bear with me while it's running its thing. So let's just run its thing. Right, so as you can see, we've now got a list of all of our stock items, but we've got these little hyperlinks that I can drill into that allows me to see what that figure is made up of. So I can see my purchasing analysis month on month. So how many have we purchased? Well, clearly we had a massive purchasing quantity in August 2024. So we might not want to increase it based on that massive one-off. And similarly, if we look at our sales, well, there's been a couple of months of sales, but on average, it's not a huge amount. We can look at our lost orders, and similarly, if we're using work sort of processing in conjunction with BOM, we can also look at any usage as part of a BOM and works order as well. So it's giving us that information behind the scenes to basically allow us to evaluate, well, actually, should we be increasing or decreasing? And in fact, I can actually, as you can see, I can change that quantity. And then all we do is we select or click update selected minimum stock, and it will then automatically update all of those associated ones, as I said, whether it's reducing it or whether it's increasing the stock level for us. So a nice simple utility to help you manage your stock levels. Now, as I mentioned, the other thing that we can do, again, is look at whether there's been any trends with regards to how much we're selling or how much we're purchasing. So again, we can look at a seasonal trend, a variation of a given period, or I can look at a monthly evaluation, or I can look at a weekly evaluation. And as you can see, it's looking at that date range to say, okay, well, what's my variation been? Has it increased? Has it decreased? And therefore, do we need to add that as an additional demand to our material planning? So when we run material planning, actually, don't just look at our minimum stock levels and our orders, we also need to take into account this additional forecast as an additional demand. So it's just running through its routine. I probably should have just chosen one stock item, but as per usual, I've gone and hit the button whilst talking and not thought about it. And again, as you'll see, look at the average usage, but I can then drill into that data to look at what that data is made up of. And again, I've got the flexibility to change it. And then as you'll see in a moment, I can then generate a forecast, which will then be added into material planning. So when we then look at material planning, as a suggestion, we can then decide, well, actually, you know what, I'm going to ignore that forecast. I've changed my mind. I don't want to include it, or actually we'll decrease it or we'll increase it. So again, it's just running through its routine. Again, like watching a boiling kettle, it always seems to take longer when you're watching it. Any moment now, we'll get some information coming up. So what I often find is customers are generally trying to pull out reports from Sage and manipulate that data, or they've got the data on good old Excel spreadsheets, and it's usually down to one person in the business that's, you know, got a rough idea because they've been in the business for so many years. You know, they've got a rough idea roughly how much, you know, needs to be increased or decreased. So there we go. Now it's just flagging up some unusual trends there. So as you can see, I've now drilled into that, and I can then see all of the sales orders that have gone out. And there we go. That's why we've got an unusual sales order of 100. So that's what's flagging it for me, that's quite an unusual figure there. So anywhere where we see that red figure, it's just flagging to me that there's been a bit of a spike there. So I can see again any transfers in and out, as well as sales orders, or if I've got works orders, I can also include my works orders as well. Now, when I select that, I've also got the ability to drill into that information, as you can see, to see on a monthly basis as well what that figure is made up of. So I don't know if you can see there, we can break it down to see how many sales orders, any stock adjustments, return to suppliers. And again, we've got that information at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to generate my forecast. And again, what it's now doing is it's looking at that forecast change to say, this is what I think you need to increase that forecast by. And then what we'll do, again, I probably should have just chosen a couple instead of select all, but never mind. One of these days I'll learn while I'm doing a demo. So it's just generating that forecast for me. And as you'll see, what we'll then do is we'll import it into material planning. So I guess, I'll tell you what, let's open up the session while we're waiting for this to run. Does anybody have any questions on what you've seen so far? Are there any questions coming through in the chat?
I haven't had anything on the chat just yet, Sarah, but what I have done is I've opened up, everyone has the ability to use their mic now. If they want to ask any questions, they can just take themselves off mute.
That's lovely. Thank you, Val. So any questions on what you've seen so far? Don't be shy, fire away.
Gosha here. I have a question.
Hi, Gosha.
These forecasts, can they be, once the system suggests what we should be ordering and I say I have some changes, are they available to be exported and then imported back very quickly, or do I have to go into each line and amend them on the system?
Right, so this isn't generating the purchase orders yet. I'll get to that bit in a second. This is just making a suggestion of an additional forecast of demand for your purchase orders. So bear with me. I'll come to material planning where it makes a suggestion of purchase orders in a second for you. But you wouldn't need to export it and import it. If it's a simple change on the line, if you just simply wanted to adjust certain lines, you could do. So this just does, sorry, go on, what were you going to say? My apologies.
Basically what we do in our company is when we do budgeting, first step is actually we would look at the planned sales for the full year per month, and we know per channel, per product, we would be planning based on quantities. So is there a possibility to include such forecast within the system via import?
You can, yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah. So when we get to material planning, there is actually
Okay.
the ability to import a sales forecast. Absolutely. So if you know that typically salespeople have given you a sales forecast, that's basically something that you can import. Or indeed, if you've got a customer that's given you a forecast on Excel spreadsheet, then that's something else that can be imported. So where it's a known forecast, that's where you would import it. This is more a kind of a trend variation where it's suggesting what it thinks you need to be increasing. So you can see there's been a 1% change, 1.12. It's decreased here, it's increased here. So there's a bit of a mixture of things here of increasing and decreasing. So I'm going to say March forecast, and then we'll save this. Oh, there is a forecast. We'll do March forecast 1 then in that case, as long as I've got a new name for it. Did you have another question, Gosha?
Yes, and does it take into consideration the transfer time? So for us, it could be about 2.5 months from the moment I make the order until the moment I receive it, because of factory preparation time and then transfer. Does that take it into consideration in this calculation?
Again, not in this one because this is about a forecast, but when we come to material planning will look at your preferred supplier's lead time. So whenever we've got it, as long as you've got your preferred suppliers set up against the stock item, and those stock items have got things like minimum stock levels, lead times, we can then look at that in material planning. So we'll get to material planning now. Let's come out of that screen for a second. That was going to be, you're welcome, that's okay. So I don't know if anybody else has got any questions while we're just saving this.
Again, Sarah, everyone's got control of their mic now. So if you do, please feel free to just pop from mute, or again, just pop them in the chat, whichever you prefer, if there is anything.
Lovely, thanks, Val. Okay. So while it's doing its stuff, it's just because it's quite a bit of information in there. Let's jump into material planning actually. So now my version, to be honest with you, is also a manufacturing version because it's almost the same, but the material planning and distribution doesn't have resource planning. We can't pick up components from a bill of materials. So this is the version that would be relevant for customers that don't have manufacturing, basically. So if I turn off suggested works orders, you wouldn't see suggested kits and suggested works orders in your environment. You would simply see suggested purchase orders. Okay, so I'm going to run this for suggested purchase orders, and just to pick up and reiterate what I was just saying, what it's doing in the background is it's looking now at that new updated minimum stock level that we've used from the distribution module. It's looking at your preferred supplier's lead time. It's looking at any sales orders that you've got on Sage as a demand, as well as, again, that forecast that we might have imported, or any sales forecasts, again, that you might have imported, whether it's from your salespeople internally, or indeed whether it's from customers. And the nice thing about this, by the way, is if we've imported a sales forecast from a customer and we then get a sales order in from that customer, it recognises that you've had a forecast from them, and it'll pop up in the sales order screen that you've already got a forecast for that. And do you now want to reduce that? Because clearly what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be duplicating the demand in that scenario. So it matches that customer sales order to the forecast as soon as you put the sales order on. So here we go. It's just giving you some simple warnings in the first instance of some of the purchase orders that might not arrive in time based on the sales order due date that you have. Where you might have used our warehouse stock transfer, we can make suggestions on where you might want to move stock from maybe a bulk location or move stock from one location to another, and you can then create the stock transfer accordingly. If any of you have traceable items that are usually food orientated, that's usually where this is more relevant, or maybe ingredients that go in that have expiry dates, doesn't necessarily need to be food, of course. We can flag if you've got items that have expired. So clearly what we now need to do in material planning is not just take into account the minimum stock levels and everything else, we now need to replenish all of these items that have expired as well. So when we come to suggested purchase orders, and again, just to reiterate, these are just suggestions. We haven't produced a purchase order yet, and it's got the flexibility for you to make changes. So it's obviously got a purchase order creation date. So when are we going to create it? Now, I haven't put a filter date on. I haven't said, look at just my demand from this period to this period. I've just left it open. So it's working all the way to the end of March. So it's looking, as I said, at our suppliers lead time and when we need these items. So it could be, I think I've got one for September there. So we don't need it till September, but we can create a purchase order in advance if we needed to. So we're looking at obviously your own internal stock code and description, but as I've got here as 2 examples, we can also pull through the supplier's part number if theirs is different to yours. So when we produce the purchase order, as you'll see in a moment, you'll have that as an additional column. Now, as I mentioned, these are just suggestions, nothing is set in stone, so you have the ability to override that. And if we scoot along the page, you'll see that it's telling you what your free stock is, but actually I can drill down into that stock item balances screen, just like you saw earlier on. So we're presenting this screen in various different places to always give you that real-time visibility of where your stock is at. Now, it's pulling through my preferred supplier, but I can change it. So as you can see, these are all of my supplies that we have already sitting on Sage. So if we do need to change it, we can do. Of course, it's pulling through the currency for you of that supplier. And then it'll pull through whatever price you've got set up on Sage against that stock item. But again, you've still got the flexibility to change it. And then whatever your pricing methodology is, it's going to base it on that. But we're also giving you some historical purchasing analysis. So we're really throwing everything at you here just to make it as simple as possible for you to decipher whether you should be committing to those stock items. Now, I can see here how much have I purchased month to date, year to date, and in the last 12 months. So clearly we've got some very large orders here. So maybe I need to be increasing the items. And then we've got that drill down option, which will break down where the demand is made up of. So we can see where our current free stock is of this particular cable gland. It's looking, as I said, at our minimum stock level, but also any reserve stock. And we can also look at any minimum order quantities that preferred supplier might have, because there's no point in us generating an order for 1 if your supplier has a minimum order for 5, as an example. So we'll up it to their minimum order quantity. As I said, it's looking at your preferred suppliers lead time, and then it's just telling you the earliest date that might arrive in based on those lead times for you. But more importantly, we're giving you that breakdown. So yes, you've got a purchase order, you've got 3 purchase orders coming in, but you've got a sales order going out there, you've got a stock transfer, and you can see that's the sales order number with the customer. And there's those forecasts that I've previously imported, whether that's, as I said, a sales forecast from the future sales, or whether it's, goes as we were just talking about, whether that's that imported Excel spreadsheet from your salespeople. So if you've got, you know, maybe a salesperson that's not exactly great at forecasting, you might say, oh, that's Sarah Vickers. We know she's dreadful at forecasting. We'll halve that forecast demand and we'll reduce that quantity down. So in here, having looked at all of that information, as I said, this is where you might decide, well, actually, we might change that quantity. And then all you've got the ability to do then is select all, or I can say, right, I'm going to select a couple of these and then create purchase orders, and then this will automatically create that purchase order for me. Now, where you are using pre-allocation, this adds another level for you. So when that purchase order lands, as you'll see shortly, and we come and book it in, we now know that that purchase order was pre-allocated to a specific customer. Many years ago, I always remember one customer saying to me that she'd been waiting something like 2 or 3 months for one part to come in from China. And unfortunately, that part got sidetracked to somebody else. And as you can imagine, the customer wasn't very happy, and all hell broke loose off the back of them then having to wait another 3 months for that part to come in for that poor customer. So it makes it easy for your warehouse staff to then understand that that particular stock item was ordered for a specific customer order. So all we're doing now is, sorry, I've ordered something that doesn't have, let me come out of that screen, that's got some intercompany. That's the trouble with using so many different items. Let's try that one. Now, the other thing that we can do is we've also got the ability to link this to our requisitions module. So if you then want to push this through for approval, we have a web portal and a mobile app where that can ping an automatic email to tell the person that there's something that needs authorization. Now, I haven't had to key this in, so huge amounts of time saving and me actually keying that purchase order in. It's done it for me automatically. But the other benefit is that we have this extra little material planning tab on the standard Sage PO screen. So I now know why we ordered this. So that could have been for a forecast. It could be, as we've got here, for sales order. Any reason as to why we ordered that would be listed in here. So it makes it really easy for you to unpick that if there is a delay in this item coming in, we know which customer orders that this is likely to affect. Okay. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier on, you've got the pre-allocation. So I now know that those items have been pre-allocated to those customer sales orders. So nobody's going to pinch them. We know that those are secure for those customers. And I've committed to the customer that when those land, that those are going to come in. So that's material planning. Very simply, just a very quick overview for you. But whilst we're in this screen, I'm going to talk to you about Container Manager. So Container Manager, again, is another module within distribution, and this is where it allows you to update tracking notes. So the first thing is I've got the ability to say in here, when an order comes in from China, what's the typical process and lead time? So we have the ability then to say, well, actually, we were expecting that to come in on the 28th of March, but actually it's not going to come in then. There's a bit of a delay in that coming in. So that's not going to come in until the 7th of April. So I can mark it as confirmed. I can pop in any notes and any problems. Now, this means then that anybody in the business will then know if there's a problem. So this isn't just me storing this information. This is about on my locally, maybe on an Excel spreadsheet. This is about this all being centralized. Okay. So if I now come to the Container Manager screen, you'll see Yes. Actually, before I get to that, the other thing I was going to show you quickly is if I filter by AB cookers just quickly, you'll see that, again, this linking to Container Manager allows me to link it to a container and say, actually, have we exceeded the volume and the weight? So we'll come and talk about Container Manager in that screen in a second, but I just thought it would be useful to show you the fact that we can also link this to the volume and the weight in here as well. So let me come out of that screen now. Yes, we want to save the changes. And you'll see if I come into the Container Manager screen now, bear with me if I whiz back up the screen a second. I've got the ability to link each purchase order, as you saw a moment ago, or a line in a purchase order to a container. So in true Blue Peter style fashion, as they used to say, this is an example of a container that I've set up. So these are the stock items and the quantity, and I've just basically linked each one of those, but I can also link the purchase order lines from here. So I can say either show me all of the purchase orders, or just show me a certain purchase order, a certain stock item, or a certain supplier, of course. And then again, I can add those specifically to the container. But it's just flagging to me that we've exceeded the volume and we've exceeded the weight. So we just simply store some extra information against a stock item that obviously says what's the weight and the volume, which makes it then really easy for us to determine if we've exceeded that. But again, we've got that same, sorry, excuse me. We've got that same tracking available in the container screen as well. So we can either update the container here, or we can update the container against the purchase order specifically. So no more Excel spreadsheets trying to keep that information. It's all centralized, which means, of course, as you saw earlier on as a salesperson, when I put the sales order on, I can then see if that purchase order has been confirmed without having to go back and talk to anybody in the business. It's all in there for me. So that, very briefly, that's the Container Manager. It's really, as I said, about being able to create containers, as you saw, add purchase order lines, update tracking notes, and be able to evaluate whether you've exceeded the volume or the weight. Right, purchase order management. So pot management does a number of different things, actually. The first of which is it provides you with a very simple mechanism to keep track of those orders, obviously, as the name suggests, the orders coming in. So what's been received, what's still outstanding, but we've got the supplier telephone number. So if we do need to change them, it makes it really simple for it to be all on one screen for me. And again, I can mark them as confirmed, or obviously if they have been confirmed, all on the same, all on the same screen for me. Now, we can also do stock inspections. Obviously, we can do this through our barcoding module, but if you don't have our barcoding module, this is just an easy way of doing a simple pass or fail, basically. So you mark that item specifically as something that needs to be inspected. It will then go into an inspection bin location, which means you can't pick from that bin location to then issue to a sales order or dispatch from a sales order. And of course, it also means that you're not sending out things that maybe haven't been inspected. If they're failed, that's when it will go into a dedicated quarantine bin location or failed bin location. And again, you wouldn't be able to pick from that either. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can set up supply price list quantity breaks. So as an example, if I bought up to 10 widgets, it would be £1. Sorry, it would be £10. If I bought 10 to 20, it would be £5. If I bought 20 to 30, it would be £2.50. So essentially what we're doing here is we're basically saying what are the quantity breaks of each of these items. So you'll see that I've said if I buy more than 10, they're £60. If I buy more than 50, they're £50. So when we add these onto a purchase order, it'll automatically pull those supply price breaks through for you. And similarly, when we're using material planning, it can also pull those through for you as well. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can set up supplier KPIs. Now, I'm finding more and more customers are starting to use this because They're finding maybe things are not arriving on time, and it's an easy way of us being able to record this data for you. So when you book something in, whether it's through purchase requisitions, whether it's through barcoding, or indeed through standard stage purchase orders, we automatically record the date for you. So in the background against this system, you basically say, what do I deem as early, on time, slightly late and late? Then you have a simple color coding that just flags for you whether you have actually had any of your items late or not. And then very simply, we've got a quick, simple drill down that then shows you month by month for that supplier specifically, if you've had anything delayed. Early, I mean, early is just as bad as late, of course. But I can also drill down to see those order lines as well, to see, well, were there anything specific that's coming in? And was it, well, we can see clearly this was around good old COVID. Clearly there was a massive problem in us getting espresso machines in around 2020. So it's just giving you an easy tool to have that conversation with your suppliers to say, you know, is there a problem? Is there a problem with certain items? So it's, you know, managing things proactively instead of you having problems further on down the line and then not being able to deliver on time to your customers, of course. Now, the other thing that I mentioned that we can do is the supplier catalogue. So this is quite handy for some of you that perhaps don't have stock items, but you might want to have a database set up of items. So it's just a simple way, basically, of recording a code without having to add free text items. So that's just an easy way of being able to manage a supplier catalogue, basically. Now, pre-allocations, let me come back into that sales order for a second. So if we whiz back to stock management, she says going again completely the wrong way. Let's come back to that sales order and amend it. Now, had I not had enough stock already in fact, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to add something that I know I haven't got stock in for. So let's add in that one. So I'm going to add in one of those. So clearly, as you saw, I don't have sufficient enough stock of those. So this is where I have the ability to pre-allocate a purchase order coming in. Oh, just typical, I've gone and chosen something that doesn't have a purchase order, just typical. Sorry, apologies. If I had a purchase order coming in, that would allow me to ring fence that purchase order coming in to that sales order. So when it landed, as I mentioned earlier on, we know that we've ring fenced that purchase order. And it also means while I'm on the phone to the customer, I can say, right, I can see a purchase order coming in on that day. I can see it's been confirmed using our tracking functionality. So we can pretty much guarantee that that's going to arrive in time. And we're giving our customer the confidence that we will be able to deliver on the date that we're suggesting. As I mentioned, when it lands, the warehouse staff also then know that it's something that we're ordering for a specific customer. So I've either got the ability to pre-allocate at this point, or you can just get your salespeople and admin staff to get the sales order on. And then as I'll come and show you through the distribution module, you've got the ability to do your pre-allocations through the distribution module specifically. So it really depends on, sorry, ignore that one. That's another one of our modules, and another one of our modules called audit log. So this just tracks changes to anything that's in Sage, whether it's, and again, another one of our modules. Wow, I've got everything turned on here. Right, so if I now come to the distribution element, you'll see that I have the ability to do my pre-allocations in here, basically. So I could say I want to pre-allocate a stock item, one of those items, to a specific sales order or PO to a sales order. So that's my other way of being able to do it, is I can create the pre-allocation from within here. So you can do it either way. The other thing, just very quickly in pre-allocations, is you've got the ability to change fulfilment as well. So perhaps if on Sage you've got fulfilment from a warehouse, your own warehouse, but you need to change it in a different fulfilment method, this just provides you with an easy way of being able to do that, basically. Right, reserves and call-offs. So this is great where you have regular customers that want you to reserve stock for them. They haven't placed a sales order with you just yet, but they're giving you advance warning that they want you to keep some stock in place. So if I come and show you again one that I've already got for good old Sicon Limited. So I said for Sicon, we are essentially holding 5 of those port plugs and 2 of those duct mounting kits for them. And then very simply, when that sales order comes in, or when the customer sends you the purchase order, I can then allocate those stock and I can then generate the sales order off the back of that. So again, it just makes it a really simplistic way of keeping track from a stock visibility perspective of where your stock is at and what's been ring fenced from a reserve perspective. And then again, an easy way of generating the sales order off the back of that. Okay. Now, the other thing that we can do are contracts, whether it's a purchase contract or a sales contract. So if you've agreed terms with, in fact, let's just quickly generate a new one, given that this is, those are quite out of date. So I'm going to say this is a contract for 2025. And I'm basically saying that any orders that come in between January 2025 and December 2025 of these items, so we just simply add on the items, and I'm going to say that that customer has committed to 100 of those cable glands during that period. So because they've committed to buying 100 during that period, we've given them a cheaper price. So what this is basically doing is it's keeping track of the quantity that's been agreed and the price that's been agreed. And then as you can see, it's then keeping track of how much balance is remaining, what's on order, what's been dispatched and what's been invoiced. When we add a sales order on, it will automatically update that price for you. But of course, it also means that if you start to get nearer to this end date and the customer hasn't committed, still hasn't purchased that quantity, then you've got an easy way of being able to report on that, to have that conversation with them. Similarly, on the purchase side, let me save that. We can do exactly the same on the purchase side. So if you've agreed preferential rates with your suppliers, essentially, I can say in here, I've agreed, again, between, let's say, that date and that date, some preferential rates of, again, we'll say that cable gland, and I've agreed to buy 100. When we add a purchase order on, it will automatically pull through that price. And again, when we run suggested purchase orders and material planning, it'll add that price. But once it gets nearer to that end date, if we still haven't purchased the quantity that we've committed to, it will add that in because it realises that you've got to commit to that price. So it'll add that into material planning automatically for you. So again, it works both sides. It works on the purchasing and it works on the sales side for you. Right. Getting nearer to the end, one of the things that I wanted to show you is if I come to a purchase order, just to finish off that piece around pre-allocations for you. So if I come and book in those items, again, this will be whether this is through barcoding, by the way, our barcoding solution, or just as I'm about to do through standard Sage purchase order processing. You'll see that we just have, there we go, that extra pre-allocations. So there's no excuses when warehouse staff book something in that they didn't know that, oh, that was for that customer's order. So I know when I book these items in that these items are basically for that customer. And then you'll see I can save and then it will just automatically then allocate them. So I don't have to do a separate allocation process. We've already pre-allocated it. As soon as we book it in, it then just allocates automatically to that customer. There we go. Allocation done. So we've booked it in and we've allocated it. But the main thing is, as I keep coming back to, is it's flagging it to your warehouse staff or anybody that's booking it in that that's already been ring fenced, and probably you've committed to your customer that that's going to be for them when it lands, basically. Right, how are we doing for time? I better quickly scoot through the rest of these in that case. I just realised what time it is. Right, apologies. So let's just quickly talk you through the others then in that case. So let's finish off and close that one. Warehouse replenishment, as I said, just is a very, very simplistic way of just moving your stock from one location to another, but with that traceability. So we know that it's in transfer, whereas when you're moving stock from one location to another with standard Sage, you lose visibility. You're doing a stock transfer, you don't know that it's in transit. So we can basically say, which warehouse are we moving it from, and which warehouse are we moving it to, and then we're just basically listing everything that we want to move. We can import this, by the way, so if you've got this on an Excel spreadsheet, you can import it, and then, as I said, it's just basically producing a pick list for us to then move that stock from one location to another. And that is me done. Wow, 3 minutes to spare for questions, Val. Sorry, I'm cutting it a bit fine there, wasn't I? So let's open the session up then. Any questions from anybody?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Again, everyone, you've got access to your own microphone now, so if there is anything, by all means, you can come off mute and ask away. Or we've still got the chat open as well, if anyone has anything there. There's nothing in there at the moment, Sarah.
Oh, Gosha's got her hand
Gosh,
up.
yeah.
That's very
Sorry,
polite of you,
me
Gosha,
again.
putting your hand up. Fire away. Bless you.
Sarah, you were showing in Sicon the sales orders. If we have, actually, let me see. We have section on Sage, sales orders processing, but we are using AI system to import these orders. So it's reading the orders from clients, imports it into Sage. Would that still work? Would we have to do any changes to that? Because what I liked is you were showing that button where we could see the moment we input an order from client, we can see that detail of, you know, what we have in stock or when it's coming. Would that still be available if we have order?
Yeah, as long as it's going into standard Sage sales order processing, Gosha, then yes, absolutely. So essentially those buttons will be visible, that once it's in the SOP, you can then go into sales order processing and you'll have those buttons. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, that today is just about a show and tell, showing you what is possible. If you do want to, you know, include more staff and you want to organise a secondary session where it's more of a one-to-one, then please do let Steve know and we can always organise that session for you. It's not a problem. So today was more around showing you what is possible, really. So anybody? Oh, sorry, go.
Sorry, me again. When you do purchase orders and you have those suggestions of what should be ordered, maybe I missed that, but can I see what we are missing in various warehouses, but still order into one?
So you can either filter when you run suggested purchase orders, you can either filter it by warehouse specifically, or you can run it so it's looking at all of your warehouses. But yeah, there is a drop down box that you can then see where your stock is. So I don't know if you remember, there's that button that you can click on that then shows you what stock is available in other warehouses.
Yeah, okay. And then the purchase order I can still set to be in that main warehouse where we always
you can
receive them. Yeah.
Yes,
okay, great.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
I'm
you
loving all these questions. I love an interactive session. Anybody else? Everybody else has been very quiet this morning. No, nobody want to ask a question?
It doesn't look.
You can always ping an email to Steve if you did want to ask a question and you don't want to ask it in this session. I know what it's like sometimes. It can be a bit daunting asking questions in these sessions sometimes. So don't be afraid to ping Steve a question in an email afterwards if you wanted to, if you're not sure.
Sorry, just me. One more, last one, I promise. Is that data linked to Power BI? So if people don't have, so I have a lot of sales guys that wouldn't necessarily need the access to Sage, but I would like to be able to generate on Power BI reports for them. So when they go to clients, they could just link via Power BI and see the stock availability. Is that possible?
That's more of a technology partner. So technology partners can produce Power BI reports for you, but you might want to look at our CRM solution, Gosha, because that does give you also access to what stock is available and access to account information. Just throwing another one of our solutions out there. If you don't have CRM, that's usually a good tool for salespeople.
Okay, thank you.
With regards to Power BI, as long as it's in Sage 200, Power BI can read anything.
Great.
That's the answer.
Thank you, Steve.
Right, I think that wraps the session up, Val. So Val will share the recordings with you. And as I said, just let Steve know if you want to organise more of a one-to-one and include more of your staff in the business, that's fine. But I hope today's been really helpful for everybody anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And again, just to reiterate what Sarah said there, everyone, there is a recording. I will send it out following the session. And again, by all means, if you have any more questions or you'd like to arrange a follow-up demonstration, as Sarah said, getting more staff involved and so on, just let us know. I hope you found the session useful today, and hopefully we will speak to you soon. Thanks, everyone.